Good evening and welcome everybody to the fifth rendition of our virtual SOF Team Room series. My name is Fran Racioppi. I'm the MC. I'm the host of the Jedburgh podcast, and I have a company that I founded a couple of years ago called FR6, and I'm so honored to be brought back for the second time. So I guess I did something right, at least a little bit in the last time we did this, but really honored to be back here for the second time to host our next SOF Team Room. This is the fifth in our series. It started in November of 2021. When we as a SOF community identified that we needed to have some honest conversations. We'd been involved in the global war on terror for 20 years. We withdrew out of Afghanistan, and we all have our opinions about how that went, but we needed to be able to get together and we needed to talk about it. We needed to have more conversations, and we needed to have honest and true conversations. And over the past year, the team room's been a place for frank and candid conversations with impactful leaders. We've had Lieutenant General Mike Nagata. We've had Lieutenant General Jim Slife, Vice Admiral Tim Szymanski, Sergeant Major Bill Tepford, Tom and Jen Satterley, SEAC Ramon Colon Lopez, Sergeant Major Hank Marsh, and Command Chief Greg Smith. I know he's a regular on here, so if he's listening, good to see you again, Chief Smith. But tonight, we're going to be talking about what it means to build a legacy that continues to lead. We are so fortunate in special operations to have, I believe, some of the absolute greatest leaders on the planet. And people will argue with me, and I'll tell them they're wrong all day long. But it doesn't matter what service you come from. It doesn't matter what era you come from. SOF has created some of the most special leaders and high caliber leaders that have served not only in our military, but continued that service when they've left. And it transcends every single conflict that our country's ever been in. These virtual team rooms are a place for these candid conversations with tough topics. We want you to leave knowing that the community that you're a part of walks this path with you. And we want to give everybody something that they can take away, apply to their life today, tomorrow, whatever it may be, and be a little bit better and a little bit stronger for it and be better as a community. We're going to be here for the next couple of hours. We have a bunch of topics we're going to discuss that are important to ourselves, our family, our community. After the opening keynote, we're going to switch gears and we're going to go into a couple of back-to-back health sprints. So if you haven't been a part of this before, there's going to be a separate Zoom link that will be a little bit further down on the webpage in which you join this on. I'll walk you through it after. So we'll ask you to click on that second Zoom link. You'll go into the health sprints. They'll be back-to-back. The first one is going to be our soft connection discussion on anchors of meaning led by Preston Klein of the Mission Critical Team Institute. The second one in the health discussion is on cancer and special operations with Rob Newson, Chelsea Simone from the Hunter 7 Foundation, and Julia Sivardi and Amanda Skeen from Soteria Precision Medicine Foundation. Looking forward to both these. That's going to be about an hour. About 8:30, we're going to ask everyone to click back on the original link for the main event page, and that's going to bring everybody together. It's going to have our keynote speakers. It's going to have everyone who is involved in both of the health breakouts, and we're going to have a collective discussion where we're going to roll up all the topics that we discussed tonight. But first, I want to introduce our keynote speakers. I'm absolutely honored to have with us tonight and be in the presence of two of the greatest leaders that special operations has ever seen. They're giants in our community, and it says arguable here, but I'm going to tell you it's not arguable that one of them has been a key player in every major conflict our country has been engaged in since Vietnam. Their commitment and their legacy of service predates the inception of many of our modern SOF units, and they have been instrumental in the direction that U.S. Special Operations Command has taken since its inception. We're all familiar with the first SOF truth. Humans are more important than hardware. It's number one because it's honestly, in my mind, the most important, but it's often tough to bring into practice. It's also possible that few other leaders, possibly no one, has done more to support that soft truth than our first keynote speaker, Admiral Eric Olson. His leadership led to the creation of the Preservation of the Force and Family and Modern Human Performance and Wellness Resources. He retired as a SOCOM commander in 2011, shortly after the Bin Laden raid. Our second keynote speaker is Command Sergeant Major Tom Corbett, whose service history is a highlight reel of nearly every historic operations we still talk about in all of our small unit classes today. He served with distinction in almost all of our special forces groups, and then he went on to serve 19 years in the Special Mission Unit. He retired, and he continues to lead and shape our units and all of our people in special operations. And just before he started, he was even talking about just getting back from an event at Fort Bragg. So that mission continues every single day. So that keynote panel is going to be led by Dr. Chris Frueh, a huge friend of Global SOF, great friend of mine. We go back a long way. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Chris. You got the mic.
All right. Thank you, Fran. A very wonderful and gracious introduction to us all. My goal over the next 25 minutes or so is to say as little as possible, because I know our audience really, really wants to hear from both of you, as do I. The only editorial type comment I'm going to make is one of the things that I've seen over and over again in my work with the SOF community over the past decade is how much admiration and reverence and respect is held for those who went before them. So, really that includes, many wars, but especially starting with World War II, Korea, and then Vietnam War. So my question, I guess, to start with, is both of you, each of you, have had incredibly long and high achieving careers that cover the course of decades, essentially a historical epoch in which we've seen quite a lot of changes in the world, in America, and also in our own in the SOF community. So I think what I'd like to hear, and I think others would like to hear, is just a little bit of your perspective. So maybe Tom, I'll let you start, but I would like to hear. Tell us a little bit about your career, maybe some of the lessons learned, some of the perspectives that you've acquired over the years. What are some of the things that you would like to say to maybe the more recent cohort of folks who are still active in SOF or more recently separated?
Well, first, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to participate in this event. And let me go to the first part of your intro, and that's really the legacy piece. One of the things that strikes me is that we are all just passing through. We are caretakers during that period of time. When we serve, we had people come before us that taught us, that coached us, that mentored us, that led by their example. We took the best from them. The occasional poor leader, we learned from them as well. And then during the course of our careers, we tried to improve. And hopefully along the way, we prepared the next cohort, because in time we'll be gone. And if we've done our job correctly, we have served honorably. And perhaps more importantly, we have prepared the next generation to carry on, to continue the mission once we hang up our uniforms. And at that, I would be interested to hear Admiral Olson's thoughts.
And thank you for inviting me to participate. You all are on a very important mission. I'm honored to have been asked to be part of at least this segment of the journey. I'm especially proud to be on this with Command Sergeant Major Corbett. He and I go back about 30 years, and I've admired his service and his character with the highest possible regard. I'll echo what Tom said about his comments about legacy, and just add to that during my time, and I came into Special Operations community a few years after Tom did. My trips to Vietnam were as a Naval Academy midshipman, not as a SOF operator. So I came in just after Vietnam ended. But the Special Operations community didn't exist. We were service entities, usually tucked fairly far down the service chains. We were an afterthought in many of the things, struggling to maintain our size after Vietnam, which we failed to do. All of the special operations forces were reduced. Post-Vietnam, it was a tough time for the community, and struggled like that, I think, through most of the 70s and into the 80s. But the failure to rescue the hostages out of Tehran, Iran in 1980 changed how to think about SOF. And when Congress passed the legislation, it created a special operations community. It was good for all of us who served in the service special operations units. I think the law got it very right. I remember fondly, before that, when there was less structure and less bureaucracy, but I think the increased professionalism, the increased funding, the increased sort of attention at the senior levels that special operations got ultimately served us well. And so that was a big change, the change into this community of SOF, which didn't really exist before, into jointness of SOF, which was an afterthought and after market modification before. It wasn't sort of built into the community, and again, the professionalism of the force. But I think it's still all about the people. The beauty of SOF is the people. The capability resides in the people. And I would echo what Tom said about those of us just passing through, trying to make conditions better so that great people will continue to come in and serve, and then trying to leave them something solid enough to build on, because in my view they just keep getting better and better. And then the third thing I'll mention is the change in the technology. And I asked a French counterpart once how life had changed during his service. He said when he came in, he was always lost, and when he left, he was never lost. And so just the ability to navigate, the ability to communicate with satellites, the change in the types and capabilities of the weaponry, all of that changed what operators can do. And so I like that old adage of SOF that we don't equip the man, I'm sorry, we don't man the equipment. We equip the man or woman, and it's still all about the person, but giving that person a better set of kit has enhanced SOF's ability to work as a joint force, work as a network force in a very powerful way. Back to you,
Tom. If you think back to when you first signed up and served overseas in Vietnam through to today, what are some of the seminal, maybe and a question for each of you will be think through maybe and tell us a little bit about some of the seminal moments, experiences, whether that's specific missions or operations that went well or didn't go well, points in time that were important learning moments. And what were those lessons?
Well, Chris, I'll highlight two. The first was the bitter failure to rescue our hostages in Tehran. It was a very, very low point in my career, in my life. It was a national humiliation. We lost 8 of our Joint Task Force teammates. And if there was a silver lining, Admiral Olson alluded to it. It was instrumental in the creation of U.S. SOCOM. And through that, the SOF enterprise that we have today. And if you'd have asked me in April of 1980, would we ever have what we have today? It is just simply unimaginable. The capabilities that we have today, you can't find them anyplace else. And so much of that came out of the bitter failure of Eagle Claw. And for me, obviously, the second one is Somalia. It was designated Operation Gothic Serpent. Most people know it as Black Hawk Down. And most pundits and most uninformed folks know that as, or regard that as a failure. And if you know anything about the military, the mission that day was to go out there and capture two of ID's principal lieutenants. We had already captured his deputy. There were a couple of others that we were seeking, with the thought being that if we disassemble ID's network, he would have to surface, and eventually we would get him. That particular day, we did capture those two lieutenants, along with about 20, upwards of 20 of ID's other principal clan members. But we paid a terrible price. A very, very high price. But there were two tragedies in my mind that came out of that operation. The first, obviously, the loss of life. But the other tragedy in my mind is the consequences of our withdrawal. It was a political decision, and it sent, in my mind, and in the minds certainly of bin Laden, an unequivocal message that all you have to do is kill a few Americans and they will quit the fight. And I think that stigma stuck with us for a long, long time, to our great disadvantage. And I will leave it at that.
Yeah, I would agree again with Tom. The first special operation I would mention, though, of real consequence was the Israeli rescue of the hostages held at the Entebbe airport in 1976. And that when asked if the United States could do such a thing, the answer was such that President Carter directed the creation of forces that could do such a thing, because they didn't exist. And so the special mission units grew out of are traceable, at least in part, back to the successful raid at Entebbe. And then I'll echo what Tom said about Eagle Claw and Desert One, and everybody gave it their very best, but in the end, a combination of poor weather and insufficient planning and a force that was thrown together in probably more haphazard way than it ought to have been. At least that's what the official report reported. Led to the creation of SOCOM. I think Desert Storm was a very important, Desert Shield and Desert Storm were very important to our community. It was kind of a coming out of SOF in a much more positive way. It was the first mission that SOCOM, after SOCOM was created, deployed forces to in a meaningful way, and the performance of all services in Desert Shield and Desert Storm was admirable, and I think it caught the attention of some senior leaders that there was a force that they could count on to do things different, do things first, do things cleverly, do things courageously, do things behind lines that just wasn't on their scope before. I don't need to say anything more about Mogadishu. Tommy and I were in the streets there together, and I'll say if there was a silver lining to that, and it's hard to find one, but if there was one, it was that people said, well, if you didn't have enough, what more do you need? And there was the inquiries into why that didn't go better than it did. And by the way, it was, as Tom said, it wasn't a defeat in the streets at all. The mission was accomplished, and despite the tragic casualties that were taken, the tactical fight was won clearly by our side. But the strategic fight, the political fight, was not. And then I think, there were so many missions post 9/11, but now that it's more than 11 years ago, the Bin Laden raid sort of pulled SOF. It had been pulled out of the shadows, slowly for quite a while, but that's showing a real spotlight on it. My own sense is and that was, and I highlight that because I don't think that that's all positive. I think the mission was a very good outcome, but I do think that this 15 minutes of fame is going to last 15 years too long, and I think that people now think of SOF as solely as this high-end kinetic direct action force, when it is so much more than that. But over the last several years, it's been all the books and the movies are about the high-end kinetic force. Nobody writes about what 90% of SOF is doing 90% of the time. You're on mute, Chris.
Eric, could you speak to that, please? Tell us about that 90% that we are not fully appreciating as a nation?
Well, I think if the Special Operations Command commander was here, he would tell you that SOF is waking up today in something like 75 countries around the world. They're in combat or near combat in 2 or 3 of those, and the rest of them, they're making a difference in really powerful ways. They're delaying or preventing conflict. They're mitigating friction that could lead to conflict. They are gaining awareness of the context of conflict. They are training and being trained by. They are training and learning from their counterparts around the world, and the fact that it's not people shooting at each other doesn't mean that it's not a very, very important SOF mission that's being done.
Tom, you've played an important role supporting SOF over the last 20 years since you retired from the military, since you retired from the U.S. Army. So you've I don't want to say you've had a front row seat even after your retirement, but you kind of have. What have you seen, and what are some of your thoughts on the SOF role and mission during the global war on terror, last 20 years?
I guess one of the things, and I alluded to it earlier, was just the tremendous expansion of capabilities, and it's not just been within SOF. I mean, you look at the conventional forces today, what they're wearing, so much of how they operate, albeit during the recent conflicts, but the gear they're wearing, some of their TTP, that came out of SOF. Just an absolutely astounding growth in capabilities, and some growth in capacity as well, that we transferred to the conventional forces. With regard to my post-retirement or post-military retirement employment, I was very fortunate to serve the SOF community, the SOF enterprise really, and the intelligence community to a bit lesser extent. And sort of ironically, for a retired Army SOF guy, a very good part of the work that I did as a defense contractor was in support of naval special warfare. I had an association with them that extended across several projects. A little bit later, we'll get a chance to see or hear Rob Newsom. I got a chance to meet him and do something for him. And a couple of his folks subsequently was involved in an effort that had to do with, well, let's just say it was intelligence related capabilities within NSW. And I mean, it was exciting work. It was purposeful work. It really made me feel like, although I was out of uniform, I was still in the game, and made some great new friends, and would like to think that in my very small way, I contributed to where we are today as a community and as an awesome SOF enterprise.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have like about 2 minutes left. And so I wish we had 4 more hours for this conversation. And I have so many questions, but that won't happen today. Could I ask each of you, just give each of you the chance, you got like 1 minute. What would you like to say to the community? What perspective would you like to share back to the community that you haven't had a chance to say yet?
All right, Tom, I'll go first on this one. I would just say that, the future of SOF is good as long as it stays soft, meaning that, the beauty of SOF is that it's not conventional. It dares to be different. It tends to understand the operational context of a fight much more. It tends to be educated as well as skillful. It and it tends to be less hierarchical, and it pushes tactical decisions, sometimes with strategic consequences, but it pushes tactical decisions down to the lowest level, sometimes to the guy whose finger is on a trigger making a decision about whether or not to take a shot. And I think as long as SOF doesn't sort of lose its soul, it keeps reminding itself why it was created, what it is, what it offers the nation that is not in support of, but what is unlike what the conventional services offer. It's in good shape.
Tom?
Chris, for my part, I guess what I'd like to say is thanks to the current generation. I can't speak for all of my generation, although the sentiment I'm going to express, I think, is widely held across my generation. And that's that we have the deepest admiration and respect for the post 9/11 generation, for their commitment, for their dedication, and for the resilience. They've been at war for 20 years. For so many of them, that's been virtually their entire career. And whereas some of us, had as I characterized you the other day, sort of periodic episodes of high adventure, they were spread across, in my case, 30 years. Whereas the generation today is back to back deployments. And so thanks to them for their service, and to the spouses. Thank you for your service, for your love, for your support, for your understanding. You're every bit as much part of our team as those guys that put on the uniforms, and gals that put on the uniforms. So thanks to all for continuing the mission.
Yeah.
Thank you. Fran, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you, Admiral Olson. Thanks, Sergeant Major Corbett. I appreciate very much your perspectives, and honestly, some of the most interesting perspectives on some of the most defining operations that have shaped our community. I think we just heard heard your perspectives there, and that was truly amazing. So thank you for that. So we're going to take a break now. We're going to transition over to the health sprints. So as I said earlier, these are going to be the interactive conversations, and they're also going to take place in a separate Zoom meeting. So if everybody scrolls down on the website that has all of the information for tonight's event, you're going to go to a section that says Health Sprint Zoom button. Click on that. It'll switch you over there. Everybody on the panels need to go over there as well, and we'll see you in there in a second.